We are each other's business because at the end of the day, if my neighbor is going through it and has to make desperate decisions during desperate times, I am likely going to be a part of that, right? Because I'm right there. And I don't even think it's like, we shouldn't even center it on like, well, I don't want them to hurt me. So it's like, actually, I want everybody to be well. And I know what it means to not be well and to feel alone. So what does it look like for us to anticipate, right, conflict, anticipate needs?
You already know, it's your girl Naira, and this is Shit Talk. What's good, everybody? My name is Naira. This is another episode of Shit Talks. It's Chicago, nigga. And I have an amazing guest here with me today that looks so cute. I love this fit. Who are you?
Hello, y'all. My name is Trina T. I'm a community member first and foremost. I'm an auntie and family member second. And then, of course, my daytime job is a data journalist.
Period. Data journalist where? Do you want to tell the people?
The Invisible Institute is a multimedia journalism organization which provides community with information and toolkits so that they can hold their institutions accountable.
Yes. That's very fire. The Invisible Institute, shout out to Anwuli, hosted the Weeklies retreat a couple weeks ago, probably a month ago by the time this airs. But yeah, shout out to the Invisible Institute. We cousins. So talk to me about what you do. First of all, you said you're a data
Director.
What does that even mean?
Okay, so when I first started at the Invisible Institute, I was doing outreach work for our Citizens Police Data Project. It's a database that houses police misconduct records. Today goes back to 1988. I think at the time it was much smaller than that. And that was my introduction to data, right? It was just like, okay, you know, in every neighborhood, every zip code, community area, there is some record of police misconduct that community members or police officers themselves have filed against other police officers. And it was my job to basically go to various neighborhoods and talk to people about what the data said about where they lived. Many people use the database, whether it be organizers, lawyers, journalists, in order to discuss police misconduct and also generally police accountability in the city of Chicago.
Yeah, that's really interesting. What made you even start doing that?
I was actually the communications co-chair for the Black Youth Project 100, and it was my job to come up with data sentences, talking points for people to prep them for the media. And what I found was I had a lot of questions about the world that many people had not necessarily done the research on. At least the research wasn't accessible to me. And so I stumbled upon the Invisible Institute founder, Jamie Calvin, and a lawyer, Craig Futterman, on a panel at the Chicago Urban League, where I was the youngest person. I was like the only woman, and I'm talking, you know, I'm like talking my shit, okay? And that panel that I was on ultimately led to me doing a AmeriCorps fellowship with the Invisible Institute. That was 8 years ago, or 2016.
Yeah. Time flies. Time really flies. That's really cool.
Say one more thing. So what that means now, as data director, I lead a project called Beneath the Surface, which uses machine learning in order to parse through narrative text of police misconduct records. And so in that database, you might see something like miscellaneous or like operation and personnel violation, which is a really flat way to talk about the way that people are impacted by policing in the city of Chicago. And so by way of Beneath the Surface, this machine learning project, we're able to talk about the context where police violence, police misconduct is occurring, specifically against women and children. And so, you know, being able to discuss, for example, the complaints that were filed when folks were attempting to report their sexual assault, and they were reporting how police treated them in that moment, you know, or for example, when folks were trying to report their loved one is missing, and they, you know, described officers mistreating them in that process. And what's important about that is it takes us away from these like individual officer did a bad thing, and it helps us to understand the ways that people's experiences with policing are connected through space and time. It could be totally different officers, but for example, in the case of reporting a sexual assault, survivors describing officers victim blaming them, describing some officers even laughing, right? Like these kinds of tactics that are not going to really show up when you're looking at a primary category in an Excel spreadsheet or in a row of data, right? Information that only comes through narrative text, through the testimony of the people who have filed said complaint.
Yeah, that's really interesting. That work is so important. I also feel like, like on the journalism side, like, right, for the Freedom of Information Act, like being like, how do I access that information? Two, being like, how do I read it? How do I make sense of this information? Three, how do we hold these institutions accountable, like to like release that data and things like that? And I think that when you go on Google and you type in like a statistic or trying to understand something, it's like, one, it might not be there, like you said, or two, when it's there, like it always makes me think like, I'm really happy that somebody like did this work to make sure this information was here, because like now it is useful for the work that we're trying to do.
Oh my goodness. And like, it's especially important in this day and age that we really understand like what data is and how we can leverage our own data. You know, when we're on social media, when we walk using our GPS, like using our phones for so many things, like they're collecting information about us, about our behavior, about the things that we even look up in order to identify larger patterns in society. And that there are ways that we in community can better understand what our shared experiences are and actually what we need in order to improve, right, our collective circumstance. Shout out mutual aid.
Exactly. Shout out mutual aid. Exactly. Yeah. Like, what I was going to say is that like understanding what the community need is like changes the way that we go about handling certain issues, right? And so like you said, with mutual aid or even just like in general, this like understanding of what makes the quality of life better, right? Like what makes people positioned to maybe not engage in violence? What makes people positioned to be able to like, okay, I have the means to be able to get up and go to work. I have the means to be able to go to school. I have the means to be able to, be proactive in participating in building up my community. And I do think mutual aid is one of those things, but what the hell is mutual aid?
Oh my goodness. Wait, Kim, before we define mutual aid,
Yes.
One of those other things that I want to uplift is what are the drivers of conflict, right? Because we understand, like a part of that understanding our collective experience is that knowing that a lot of the stuff that's happening in the city of Chicago, at the root of it is conflict. At the root of it, it's really interpersonal issues, things that we can really anticipate that spill over into the streets, that spill over into neighborhoods, across blocks, and ultimately across the city. And so like understanding people's needs and how that correlates with even crime, right? It's such a big thing because we could really talk about the root. We can talk about prevention. So let's get into mutual aid.
Yeah.
Okay.
What the hell is that?
Oh my goodness. What is mutual aid? I believe so many people will have different definitions of what mutual aid is. It's really about like cooperation. It's about collective people. It's about it's not about charity. It's not about dangling things in front of people and then being like, ooh, look, I did this cool thing. Let me put these people on display. It's not about barriers to entry, right? Something that happens in a lot of it happens with a lot of resources that the city provides and that other philanthropists provide because they are so gung-ho on data that sometimes it creates a barrier to entry. Mutual aid is about coming together as a community, as a group, identifying what shared needs are, and then contributing in a way that is not about what do I get back. You know what I mean? It's about how do we support each other. And it can look so different. Like sometimes mutual aid is food. Sometimes mutual aid is information.
Sometimes it's services.
Sometimes it's services, right? There's so much that aid that is necessary for people that there are barriers to entry to. And so especially when I became explicitly a part of mutual aid effort, it became abundantly clear to me that mutual aid, first and foremost, was about breaking down the barriers to entry that so many institutions have built up.
I agree. I was just thinking about also like I was spacing out, so I was thinking about like the difference between like charity work and mutual aid, right? Like what's the difference? And I think that also when you talk about those barriers to entry, it's like when I see mutual aid work, there's less questions about qualification or like proving that you like are struggling, proving that you are, you know what I'm saying? Like those things that I feel like differ from charity work. Also the other thing is that like mutual aid efforts are usually stewarded by people who are like from or identify with those communities, which I feel like is a huge difference too, and also changes the impact, right? Like it's different for me to receive groceries from someone who looks like me or someone that I know than it is for me to receive like aid from like a white person who I've never seen before and will never see again after this, who just came here to do a community service project and then leave.
Well, and then also the types of things that are offered at a mutual aid that is driven by the people who live within the community is going to provide a different type of, it's going to provide a more culturally affirming, a more culturally aware opportunity to provide aid, right? So you don't want to go to I don't know, people always make a joke about the missionaries that go to Africa to teach them how to kill chickens I say Africa have a lot of countries within it, right? But to some village where like they don't even eat chickens, you know what I'm saying? It's like you have to be mindful about, you know, what are you providing to folks? Are they actually going to use it? And I think when you are in a position where the people who are driving the mutual aid look like the people who are receiving the mutual aid, then we're also creating a culture of sustainability and opening doors for people who are receivers of the mutual aid to become contributors to, you know what I'm saying, a part of the infrastructure, a part of the literal infrastructure, which is really powerful. Because we're not seeing each other as us versus them, right? It's like we. Right, we all eat, you know?
Exactly. Yeah, that's very real. I'm also laughing at like going somewhere and teaching them how to kill chickens. They don't even eat chicken. Somebody thinking in their head like, why did you just kill my pet? Like, like did he literally just kill Joseph the chicken? Why? And then what does he want us to do with him?
Eat him?
Y'all eat chickens? Right. That's crazy. Yeah, that's very interesting. So, like, do you feel personally connected to like just the mutual aid like framework? Because I feel like I watched a lot of that type of ideology growing up. Like, for example, when it comes to like doing people's hair costs money, right? Like people do hair as a job, but like I do my friend's hair for free because I'm like, well, this is a service I have to provide for you, right? Or childcare and stuff like. So what do you think?
Oh, 1000%. Growing up in a place where like we all are connected. We all have needs. We all know that there are financial, you know, the limits of our pocketbook, right? And also tribe shit. Like when I think about a village, when even thinking about like within my family and how, you know, the young people in my family, they are a part of a village. There are multiple adults who are not paid babysitters, but are people who are invested in the growth and development of this child for free. When I think about growing up, my friend Cheviana, my sandbox bestie, doing my hair, braiding me up into a mohawk, me feeling like, you know what I'm saying, I was such a baddie after that. Like these kinds of things, like leaning on your neighbors for some kind of exchange. It's really deep. It's really deep, and I think mutual aid is a part of so many people's community infrastructure, but we didn't necessarily call it that. We just call it village. You know what I'm saying? We just say these are people, and I think a big part of mutual aid is about having some connection to your neighbors, right? What does it look like for us to actually be neighborly and to not just mind our business? Because I think, and I've seen so many instances where, you know, you hear somebody screaming down the street and then someone else is like, that's not your business, keep it moving. And it's like, we actually need to pull away from that. I think a lot of that is rooted in fear. If they're screaming, I don't want to show up and then also be in a position where I'm screaming too now.
Exactly.
But we don't live in a world where individualism is conducive to thriving. I mean, when you think about capitalism.
That's what I said.
Yeah.
Individualism is a facet of white supremacy. I always say that, bro. It's like worrying about your business is very capitalist.
But we are each other's business. Because at the end of the day, if my neighbor is going through it and has to make desperate decisions during desperate times, I am likely going to be a part of that, right? Because I'm right there. And I don't even think it's like, we shouldn't even center it on like, well, I don't want them to hurt me. So it's like, actually, I want everybody to be well. And I know what it means to not be well and to feel alone. So what does it look like for us to anticipate, right, conflict, anticipate needs, and then create those spaces so that we can give people a little more breathing room so they don't make desperate decisions, so they're not forced to make desperate decisions.
That's very real. I think that's one that's so important, like the pain that comes with like feeling alone, especially when you're surrounded by people, like especially in a city that's so densely packed like Chicago. You know, there were times that like I needed help and like people were kind of just like not paying attention or like didn't really care or whatever the case is. And I know the difference in like how warm and how accounted for I feel when people are looking out for you, even without having to ask, you know, although it is important to ask, like please ask for help if you need it. But like, there's just like a sense of like warmth and security. Like even if the world is falling apart, I have $0.00. A comment is beating my door down. Somebody brought me something to eat. I'm good. I'm gonna live to see the next day.
Right. What you're speaking to is like this feeling of safety, right? Feeling safe. Safety goes beyond like, I'm gonna call the police, right? Because sometimes when you're in that situation where you gotta call police or you feel inclined to call police, right? That's like, oh my gosh, things are so escalated. But it's like all these things that come before that are inherently connected to the feelings of safety, right? You're like, you know, the world is falling apart and feeling comfortable enough to share your circumstance with someone else requires you to feel safe enough to know that if you talk about what you're going through, they're not going to mishandle you. They're not going to abuse you. And actually, they will use that information in order to improve your circumstances instead of taking advantage of them. And so, you know, you cannot, all of us have gone through something. And regardless of our identity, be it race, ethnicity, sexuality, gender, all, you know what I'm saying, all of these things that really impact our lived experience, class, all of that stuff, access. There are so many of us who have a shared experience of like feeling some kind of pain or frustration or fear, right? And the question is, what are you provided in that moment so that fear, isolation, etc., doesn't begin to overflow and build and escalate into a circumstance that is ultimately life-threatening.
Yeah, that's very true. And a time that like I feel like obviously a lot of people were experiencing that fear, that kind of like, wow, the world feels like, you know, it's caving in on me, was like, you know, at the start of the pandemic, people, oh my goodness, bro, I was so broke. Like, oh, what you mean you freelance? Freelance to where? Whereas there's nothing open. You don't have the money. Like, you know, and before anything was stimulated, when they stopped, you know, the city had decided they weren't going to continue. Was it they were passing out food, right? They were like providing food to like communities via the schools that were in those communities, and they stopped doing that. A lot of people were like, dang, you know, and now what? And there are so many and now what situations, right? And so a lot of mutual aid efforts popped up during the pandemic, or people who were already doing that work continued that work. And that's how I met you at the People's Grab and Go. But what the hell is that?
Okay, so before the People's Grab and Go, the People's Grab and Go was a mutual aid effort that was located at Burke Elementary. That's on 53rd and King Drive.
Southsider. Where I'm from, best side, sorry, best side.
Listen, we love the West Side.
That's true. That's true.
We a little different because of, migration patterns. I feel like the West Side is still a little more country.
They are.
And it's because of the history.
Yes.
It's the history. It's about, a lot, when folks first came to the city, it was like the South Side, and then there was and then the West, and then also, like, there's a reason why the culture of the South and West Sides are so different.
Yeah.
And I don't want us to be against each other.
No. I love my Westians.
But I do love South Side.
No, I do love South Side, but like some of the people that I love the most is from out west too. So
it's true.
We in this together, and they're so gregarious and so friendly. There's something just like so Chicago about like a bunch of people just deciding like we're finna just do this thing. Like why would we wait for somebody else to do it? We're just going to do it ourselves. And so thank y'all for like stewarding that work and taking the time to be like, all right, well I am somebody. Like, well let's go get it done. But also, what made y'all decide to create like the rhythm that y'all had the framework that y'all had? You could just walk up and just grab their food and just go, literally.
Well, so a part of it is that everybody eats, right? So it's like everybody have needs. Mm-hmm. The stores were, first of all, folks are already living in food deserts. Mm-hmm. And so when you put on top of that the fact that like many stores were destroyed in the process of this largest uprising in the nation, right? It was a lot of people who were like, I am on foot. How do I get something to eat? Mm-hmm. And the reason why, again, that grab and go piece is because we didn't want folks to feel like we were surveilling them in order for us to give them anything, right? And there are so many folks who are afraid that like if they give you their name or information that that they might be arrested. Yeah. But and we know that many criminalized populations have children. Mm-hmm. You know what I'm saying? Many criminalized populations are children. Mm-hmm. And that regardless of you criminalized or not, everybody needs nourishment. Everybody needs food. And so at the grab and go, we provided also not only food, but there was like hygiene packs and snack packs, diapers, right? Yeah. These things that that people needed. And the reason why we committed was just because we felt that it was our duty. We felt that we could. We felt so much love, not only between us, but also for our people, and could see the people wanting to plug in to the infrastructure. Like you named that we met through People's Grab and Go. Yeah. By the end of the Grab and Go, you were like leading these bagging sites at YCA. It's like there are always people who are looking for ways to plug in. Mm-hmm. And if you build the structure for folks to do so, people will get active. Yeah. But a lot of times there is no structure. Mm-hmm. People don't know how to plug in. Mm-hmm. People have so many gifts and talents that they could provide and what they desire to give to the world, right? Mm-hmm. But they don't know where to go with it. And we don't want to put we don't want to put out the fire of people. Mm-hmm. We want to stoke that fire so that, so folks can know what it feels like to contribute, in a meaningful way, to contribute to community for the sake of doing so, not for the sake of anything else but that.
If people don't know where to start when it comes to contributing to their community, when it comes to like even just like mutual aid or the ideologies that kind of like fuel this like mutual aid, just like idea and framework, right? Like what do people do if they're like get involved? Like how on the day-to-day, like how can we navigate the world? If you have any ideas on how we can navigate the world in order to kind of like give a little piece of that.
Well, one, like find your people. Mm-hmm. You know what I'm saying? Like ultimately, like mutual aid cannot be done without some set of people. Mm-hmm. Also, two, like identify what's already being done. You know what I'm saying? Like what kind of work is already, mutual aid work is being done, and think about ways that you can build capacity for said mutual aid work. For example, lots of people who receive mutual aid are not on the internet. But when you are on the internet broadcasting about your mutual aid, it's a lot of times because people are able to provide donations to your mutual aid effort. And so if you are a graphic designer, you're like, how do I bolster, you know what I'm saying? How do I uplift, right, this organization or crew of folks who are already doing work on the ground, that you can contribute in the form of a graphic design, or like it was at the experimental station and there was at the church.
Oh my gosh,
Market Box.
Yeah, Market Box.
Please forgive me. It's been a long day. But even with Market Box, like you just need somebody who has a car who's willing to drive the route. You know what I'm saying? Sometimes you need somebody who's gonna pack the boxes, right? And then also identifying mutual aids that already exist as models to recreate in a different place. Because a lot of mutual aid, you're not gonna, it's not about bringing it to scale, like making it some big fancy thing. It's about getting the aid to the people. And sometimes you need models that have already existed in order to help you to build that structure. So many mutual aid works came out of the People's Grab and Go in different parts of the city because we were able to be like, this is the kinds of things that you should be accepting. This is how much time you'll need for setup. These are the coolers. Like we were sharing a tent with the mutual aid that was on the west side, you know, like ways that we can support each other, you know what I'm saying, without, you know, there are just ways that we could support each other and plug in meaningful ways by way of learning from each other, from learning what has already happened, specifically learning from Miriam Kaba too.
Yeah, shout out to Miriam Kaba. Yes.
Because like at the very beginning of every grab and go, we were talking about, you know, the fact that the city of Chicago has not invested in things like, you know, the grab and go, and how, you know, there are, you know, entities and institutions that provide bags of food, but they making you provide an ID with every bag.
And fill out a form and get all types of stuff.
And so many people don't even have IDs. So why put a cap on the amount of bags of food that people can receive? Some people are grabbing bags for their neighbors too, you know? And so talking about the correlation between hunger and conflict, hunger and crime, right, was really a part of our infrastructure. And I think directly tied to, you know, what Miriam Kaba is talking about when she's talking about mutual aid and the importance of showing up for your people.
That's so real. So, you know, speaking of like what is and isn't supported, especially like by the city and cities in general, right? The country, right? Like these barriers, etc. I think that like as a result, a lot of mutual aid efforts have leaned on crowdfunding for resources, in-kind donations, monetary donations in order to run. And in 2020, we saw this like huge outpouring as a result of like these uprisings where people were like, I'm just trying to get into heaven. Let me make sure I'm not racist. Let me get some money, like, or whatever the case is, and like opened up their pocketbooks. All of a sudden, now everybody had money to give, and then time went on, and like those funds started to dry up, and it made it really hard for like, you know, mutual aid efforts that were then became accustomed to functioning at a higher volume to being like, okay, we only have this much money, we only have these many resources, and so I'm wondering like. Now, right, it's 2023, people are still in need, people are still, like, these resources are still necessary. How do you stay encouraged in just, like, the work? Like, how do you, like, stay motivated in the work or still connected to the work, even when it feels like sometimes nobody cares?
That's a really good question. When it feels like nobody cares. Well, it's interesting, especially as we, like, fast forward to 2023, it's been over a year that buses of migrants, asylum seekers, people, human beings have been bused to the city of Chicago and basically kind of left on our doorstep. And it's interesting, I've seen mutual aid, pop back up. People are like, oh, I'm gonna go and I'm gonna give money to people, or mutual aid, right? Mutual aid, and I put it into quotes because I've seen a lot of discrimination arise in the mutual aid, right? It's like in the 2020, it's like we talking about the black people. So, we gonna give the money to the right. And then now we're talking about the migrants, which, through, many people's lenses, the migrants and asylum seekers are only brown people, invisibilizing the Haitians and also Afro-Latino populations that are also coming through to the city. And so I've heard horror stories from folks who are often near police stations when aid is coming, and folks come because they cook this whatever, and they're like, this is for the for the migrants. And then some black folks who are migrants come up and they're like, well, not them though, right? Not them. And so when we're picking and choosing, I'm seeing like discrimination within the way that people are choosing to give. Now at the grab and go, we have majority black folks, but there was a family of Latinx folks, I don't know where they was from, we were certainly speaking Spanish, that were pulling up in their truck with their family. And first I could tell word of mouth it was getting out. Because first it was this one face, familiar face, and then then it became another face, a person whose primary language was not English. And we were not like, well, you can't have some, but you can have some. It was about the fact that everybody eats, right? In the case of today, thinking about mutual aid and folks who are experiencing hunger, right? Everybody eats, but when we experiencing folks who are like, I'm doing my part, but I'm not doing my part for the black people now.
I'm just doing my part for other people.
I'm doing my part for the brown people, for the people who I'm seeing in the mass media. It's like, it's interesting. It reminds me of when people like go to Africa and they adopt a baby and they're like, look, I adopted this black African baby. It's like, okay, do you know how many black folks who are literally your neighbors, blocks away, a zip code away, who are experiencing horrific things, right? Who are experiencing hunger as well, but they are not your type of, right?
Charity work.
And that's that charity work, even though it can be disguised. People disguise it. People have co-opted the mutual aid language. And so I think like it gives me hope today that people are thinking about ways to get active and feel so inclined to get active. But then it becomes so frustrating, right? Even when thinking about this housing situation, right? Folks in South Shore, folks in Woodlawn have been fighting for community benefits agreement, have been describing, right? South Shore is the eviction capital. It has been described as the eviction capital of the city.
That's crazy.
And there is a need for housing. There is a need for treatment for substance use abuse, and then new arrivals, migrant population, asylum seekers are coming and they talking about changing the South Shore High School into a housing facility for this population of folks who just got here. And people in the surrounding neighborhoods, in that neighborhood, were so upset because they're like, well, we actually have a super high population of folks experiencing homelessness. And years ago, y'all surprised us and made this school into a police training facility. Now y'all want to run it back and make it a place for, migrant populations, naming like everyone needs housing, but also naming, right, the frustrations with how we decide to prioritize and deprioritize certain groups of people.
Exactly. Like, why are you're choosing to house? Because no one is saying that they shouldn't be housed somewhere, but like housing them in a community that you are already not taking care of, housing them in a community where everybody is not even housed.
Right.
When there are people, why you ain't put them in Edgewater? Why?
And people are not thinking a lot about how housing can be a part of mutual aid. People need And just in the same way that everybody needs to eat, everyone
needs
needs somewhere to live. Right? And then we find ourselves in these positions where folks are being pitted against each other. One group of folks is being demonized.
Yeah. Whereas all of them are in need, you know?
Everyone's in need. And when we see a migrant population, undocumented population, on top of a neighborhood or a set of neighborhoods who are already experiencing, terrible conditions, especially post-pandemic, we're going to see that addition exacerbate the issue. Because with migrant populations, they cannot work, they don't have visas. So all of the work that they're doing is going to be a form of trafficking. Folks who are predators are going to come and be like, let me pay you for cheap. There is no work visa, you know what I'm saying? And so it's like we're stirring the pot of, the exploitation of human beings right now in a way that, and we're again dividing folks during a time where we need to really be talking about how do we radically change the way that we talk about providing resources to unhoused people. It's really, I'm feeling really frustrated and a little overwhelmed right now, even because I drive past a police station every day and I see children and I see folks like it's like open outside, right? And I know that if there were black folks out there, but black folks have gone to jail for loitering. You know what I'm saying? Like, let alone having the ability to set up a tent on a police station's lawn. And that's not to say that we need to be arresting people. That's to say that we need to be talking about how we can utilize these spaces in order to protect people and account for like human need.
Yeah, that's very real. It's very real and it's very heartbreaking and it's also just like, it is frustrating. Yes, I need. Hold on, can we do it again? That's so real. That's literally so real. Yeah, I appreciate you sharing that knowledge too and just expanding on that because I think that like a lot of people are confused about what the frustration is and what the work even looks like and how the work can be like more well-rounded and more comprehensive. And I think like what you were sharing is hello, what you were sharing is an example of that, right? In places where there are like pockets or deficits or like things are being overlooked. I know that like mutual aid is not the like end all be all and not the solution to everything all the time, but it's definitely very helpful for folks to be able to just create the space to go and help one another. And yeah, I don't have the answer, and I know that like none of us have the answer yet, but I'm really hoping that some answers come sometime sooner than later. What you gonna say?
No, I mean, yeah, I hope that some answers comes sooner than later too, and I'm really hopeful that we, really think about who the target is, right? Like knowing that, even today with migrants, with asylum seekers, the human population, right, coming in this direction, knowing that soon climate refugees will also begin the trek to Chicago. We need to really be thoughtful about what communities, what cities look like, because, at the end of the day, there is so much destruction that could come out of this moment. And there's also so much healing and so much hope and so much opportunity. And I think that, it is my hope that the city of Chicago, can be one of the places where a model for, communities popping out on a small scale, right? Not needing for us to be like wide scale recognition. I did, you know what I'm saying, but on a small scale, building networks and infrastructure of tender love and care, because when shit really hits the fan, which it is on the way / already happening right now, if we don't know each other, we will all die.
Yeah.
So we have to know each other. We have to love each other, and we have to find ways to show up in a time of crises, because we will all one day be in crises, and it'll be completely out of our hands. And if we don't know each other in that moment and are not in the place to, I got the garden going, you know what I'm saying? I got the, I got the child care going. I got the and feel like we can even trust each other to extend that, right? If we don't have that, it's not something that's so easily built when the buildings start coming down.
That's very true. Thank you. I appreciate that. And I'm very excited to see what that looks like going forward. But I really hope that folks get in tune with it. Thank you so much.
Me
Trina,
too.
for
Thank you. I
sharing
hope
this
that I did what I needed to do.
You
There's
did.
so much that I did not say. I want to name that. Please don't freeze me in time, y'all. I don't want to make invisible anybody's story.
Oh,
You know what I'm
no.
saying? But and I look forward to learning together, right? It's a blessing to be here, to be able to talk about this full circle years later, right? To know
Exactly.
about the work that you continue to do in the ways that you have grown as like this young woman, right? And like I look forward to the future generations and the ones that came before us, that we kind of come together and figure out a way to be connected in an intergenerational space, and not in a way that polarizes us and tears us apart.
Thank you so much for creating the space for us to be able to grow when we were first starting to do that work, because that is an exact example of like that gap being filled and us being able to come together. So I'm so happy that I met you. I'm gonna hold your hand when I say this. Thank you so much for coming on Shit Talk. Yeah, I feel good about it. You feel good about it?
I feel great.
I feel great. Thank you so much once again. I'm your host. Not us ending on this.
The thing in the world is
we're like, and we might die.
And
but
love
anyway.
prevails.
Exactly.
And love prevails.
Look at us. We just had this deep conversation, but the fact that like so much love was created in that time of need, it's unbreakable and unchangeable. Unbreakable.
So you can find me at Trina T Trill on Instagram. I just got a Twitter, but I be on there talking about the climate mostly. I have a couple things coming out. Be on the lookout. Read my pieces that I have written with love and care. And yeah, hit my line.
Yeah, hit a line. Be a good person. Yeah.
Love each other.
Love each other real hard. Like
Love
for
each-
real, not for fake. Okay, y'all. Thank you so much. This has been another episode of Shit Talks. My name is Naira. This is Trina T, the realest, the trillest.
Pew, 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 pew,
And that's
pew.
it. Peace.